This is Crossroads Recovery Coaching. I'm the director of Crossroads Recovery Coaching. I'm someone that was I had the very first website dedicated to professional recovery coaching and have been coaching since 1997. I co founded Recovery Coaches International and I train people to be professional recovery coaches. So, the topic here today is the 5 risks of hiring a recovery coach. There are risks involved in hiring a recovery coach, mainly because it's a very new profession. And as often happens when there's a new profession, it can be a little messy at the beginning in terms of clarity about exactly who's doing what. There's some time before credentialing and licensure and accreditation all gets established. And that's really where recovery coaching is at this time. So we're going to talk about, all the sorts of people who call themselves recovery coaches and the risks of hiring the wrong coach. And so we're going to look at recovery coach trainings, skills of basically 2 types of recovery coaching, and what constitutes coaching expertise, and really also how to avoid some common mistakes. So there may be other risks, but these are definitely the ones that I see. It's very easy and understandable to hire the wrong kind of coach. Well, basically there's 2 types, peers and professionals, but there are many people, other people, who also call themselves recovery coaches. You can find yourself hiring someone who calls himself a recovery coach but has either no coach training at all, or they have very little or poor quality coach training. You could also hire someone who's trained but doesn't have the expertise to meet the needs of you or your client. Or you could hire someone who's well trained, has expertise, but still isn't a good match. And then you could also hire someone who is genuinely unethical. So we'll just be going through these various things, and the main reason why there is confusion about what is a recovery coach is there's a whole bunch of people who use that name, and a whole bunch of different professions that are called recovery coaches. And some of those people include sober companions. Sober companions are people who stay 24 hours around the clock with someone. It started in Southern California in the entertainment industry. They can be part bodyguard and part sponsor. Um, and basically they originally developed to really make sure that entertainment stars met their contract, and so the rock and roll band didn't get drunk and uh, too coked up to perform. So it's really a bit more sophisticated than that now. Sober companions might be someone who comes and stays with someone who's left treatment, who has a history of chronic relapse. But in any event, they are they're face to face, and they probably are not trained as a coach. Sober coach is what the media calls sober companion because it's a shorter word than companion. And so when you see, so and so has hired a sober coach, they probably have hired a sober companion. A sober escort is someone who either might accompany someone to an event that uh, might serve alcohol or somehow be a risky event. But that word is also used for people who transport individuals to or from treatment. And since the most common day to relapse is the day you leave treatment, nowadays people protect their investment in treatment by making sure that someone escorts that person home and gets them back safely. A recovery support specialist is one of the various words used for a particular type of recovery coach. It's going to refer to a peer recovery coach, um, and we're going to be distinguishing between peers and professionals here in a moment. The other type of recovery coach may call themselves a recovery life coach, and those are typically people who are trained in life coaching, and they're trying to distinguish themselves from the peers, so they call themselves recovery life coaches, or they may call themselves professional recovery coaches. And so those are all of these people may be called a recovery coach. It's just a really um, it can be confusing, but basically the last four people here um, are more likely to be doing what we're going to discover are they're more likely to be providing coaching services. And I would just say that in some states they didn't use the word coach because they established peer recovery support and didn't base it around coaching. So we'll look at that a little bit more when we look at various types of trainings. So one of the first things you're going to want to be able to do is to distinguish the peer from the professional recovery coach. So professional recovery coaches are trained. They're trained in a really advanced skill set that's based on the skills of life coaching. So they would be eligible to go to the International Coach Federation and become credentialed as a life coach. But they have also, uh, been trained in addiction recovery and how to apply coaching skills to addiction recovery. So it's used for people who are in early or long-term recovery. Um, and that's going to be different than the peers because the peers are going to focus very much on early recovery. But professional coaches help people who want to decide, um, do they want to go to treatment? If so, what would be a good place to go? Do they want? How do they make that decision? Would it work for them to just go to a 12-step program? Um, are they someone that might might need medical help? So coaches cannot diagnose, but they can help somebody basically screen through what is safe and what their options are. And professional recovery coaches will support someone who prefers to find alternatives to 12-step recovery. So they definitely support 12-step recovery, but they'll help people who want to use other things, women for sobriety, SMART, that kind of thing. And they also help people who haven't decided yet that they're ready to stop and want to look at how to moderate or reduce risks associated with their use. Other than that, professional recovery coaches also will work with people who might be in long-term recovery, might have 3 years or 7 years, and are ready to work on the things that they care about, the dreams that they have, the goals that they want to pursue, whether it's going back to school or getting a raise or starting a new career or raising a family, any sorts of things that people are interested in doing. But they want to work with a coach who really gets recovery, so they don't have to explain the way that they think and um, that they might have good days and some days that are rougher for them. So, so the other thing to say about professional recovery coaches is they really have a whole life emphasis. They use a wheel of life and look at various aspects, relationships, money, work, spirituality. All of those things are really part of professional recovery coaching. So let's look now at peers. So peer recovery support. Now, so this, I'm using that word, but these may be called peer recovery coaches. Um, and it's often, they really are, either of those names can mean the same thing, or it may have some differences. And I can only talk about that when we get to education. But nonetheless, uh, peer coaches are looking at what are the barriers that stand between this person and being able to stay in to stay sober. So they um, they often take kind of a case management approach. They do a lot of referral. They do advocacy, so they might help. They might go with someone and advocate for them to make sure that they get housing. They so the sorts of barriers that they might be working on, they might be helping people connect with mental health services, domestic violence, making sure that they have food, shelter, all the things that those basic needs are, and at the same time, what that individual cares about. And they model assertiveness, they model how to be in recovery, how to go to meetings, how to find a sponsor, all of those sorts of things. So, being able to distinguish between a peer and a professional coach is a basic distinction. But unfortunately, there are many people who call themselves coaches who have no coaching skills, no coaching skills training, and so this is a list. This doesn't mean that these are necessarily bad people, except for the last one. But there are many therapists who have decided that they want to become coaches because they're not interested in working on trauma anymore. And so they just sort of they just advertise themselves as coach. Um, there's a little bit of a challenge with that, um, unless they've really trained in positive psychology and that whole movement. They're not going to really be very coach like, because because their training is basically in looking into the past to find out what went wrong and trying to repair those types of things. So coaching is strength based, and coaching is present and future oriented. So anyway, I can't say that all therapists who call themselves coaches are necessarily um, I don't know. I just would be very. I would really want. I prefer that you hire coaches who have some coach training. I guess I have that bias. So the same thing applies with chemical dependency counselors. Some of them also have decided to, um, call themselves coaches. Some of them have coach training. I have trained coaches for Hazelden, and all of their more coaches are also chemical dependency counselors. So there are some very good treatment centers that are training their chemical dependency counselors to be professional coaches. In some states, peer recovery support specialists actually don't have coach training. And coach training, I think of coach training as really advanced skills in listening, in questioning, in reflecting, in challenging, in giving feedback, and those are skills that are, a therapist might have learned basically some of those same skills. I think the difference is going to be that in coaching, coaching has a partnership model. There's no hierarchy. There's not I'm the expert and I have advice for you. That is not, that might be consulting, that might be something else, but it's definitely not uh, how coaching is done. And so it's a partnership, and the other thing, as I mentioned before, is strength based. And so a well trained recovery coach, whether it's a peer or a professional, is going to be looking to leverage that person's strengths um, on behalf of the goals that that client chooses. And I would say that's going to be a little more true with the professionals than the peers. I think the peers probably they I don't know. I may not. I'll just stop there and see. Um, so because it's possible to make money as a coach, there are people who are. I've heard of a few 12-step sponsors who call themselves coaches now because they have the opportunity to to make money doing that. My preference would be that they would get training. I put these last three on here just to say that there is really nothing that prevents anyone from calling themselves a coach. It's not. There may be some states that have uh, credentialing or licensure or standards, but many states don't. And so, literally, anybody can hang out a shingle that says, I'm a coach, I'm a recovery coach. And that is something that I'm looking forward to seeing change. But it's important to understand that you really do need to ask some questions before you hire someone to be a coach. So the other possibility is, yes, they got some training, but it wasn't a particularly good training. I remember seeing a 6-hour certification course. I don't know if it still exists, but there was a time in the state of Indiana where you could take a 6-hour certification course that gave you a certification that said you were now a recovery coach. Um, there are any number of weekend or week long trainings that may be pretty good trainings, and my own bias is that it takes longer than that to learn to be a well qualified coach. And so I prefer two things. I prefer trainings that are live. So I like that a face to face or a phone based training, but I want it to either have a long enough duration that someone actually gets to develop their skills over time and to practice them over time and to get feedback on how they're doing and suggestions for improvement and that kind of thing. So that's not going to happen in an online training. There are, I was looking around, I didn't see an online training that seem to have any live interaction. But there's no reason why, um, say, a week long training can't then have an online component and a phone based component, so that there's follow up, so that there's more retention of the materials and more time to develop skills. There are trainings that actually don't teach uh, coaching skills. And when I talk about coaching skills, I'm talking about life coaching skills that you might find exemplified in the core competencies of either the International Coach Federation or Recovery Coaches International or the European Coaching Union. Anyway, there are many worldwide. There are many places that have core competencies and ethics that really demonstrate coaching skills and principles. But a number of my students have been involved in various states that have started coach. What they originally were thinking were going to be recovery coach training programs, and in both states, my students were able to get them to call it peer recovery support specialists because by the time the whole thing got designed and the state was involved, there was really, pretty much no life coaching skills in it. So, uh, in one state, they have 40 hours that's offered by the State Department of Behavioral Health. So they're getting some things that can be important, but a lot of HIPAA kinds of things and ethics, um, and a few things, and then they're getting some things about mental health, co-occurring disorders, and some things about addiction, but they're not actually getting coaching skills. And that can be the case with peer recovery support specialists. They may, if you're lucky, they may have some motivational. They may have been trained with some motivational interviewing, which is definitely a coach-like process. Um, the other thing that you're going to want to look for if you're looking for training or you're looking for a coach is, did they take a training that qualified or met some type of reasonable standards? This is tricky because there are not really national standards set yet. Um, Recovery Coaches International is going to publish theirs here soon. For in the peer recovery world, ICRC is developing some peer recovery standards, and those will be available soon, but they don't exist right now. On the other hand, for instance, any one of my students can go and get credentialed by the International Coach Federation, or any really pretty much any. Um, there's more than one coaching organization in the world. So, but because we have a recognizable set of skills and they're trained in it, um, my grads can go and get credentialed at a number of different places. And again, I'm going to say this in another way, which is, so this is what I tell my students: if they live in a state that has standards and licensure that's really intended for the peer recovery coach, but they just call it recovery coaching, um, I tell my students, go take that training and make sure that you meet the standards within your states, because you're not going to be very convincing if you have to tell a judge, I didn't think that it applied to me. So you really want to make sure that if there's standards in your state, that you're going to be able to meet them. The next type of risk is that you may be hiring a peer coach or a professional coach that is well trained, um, but they actually don't have the expertise to work with a particular client. The ratio of people who have mental health diagnosis who are also have a diagnosis in substance use disorder is 25% of them. But 60% of the people who have a diagnosis with a substance use disorder or substance abuse, 60% of them have a co-occurring mental health diagnosis. And so it's really good to make sure that you have that you're hiring somebody who knows at least a bit about that. But if your client really has, and I believe that there are some people who may possibly have been misdiagnosed. It's people get diagnosed often while they're still detoxing, or and some of that may clear up. On the other hand, if they were self medicating their mental health problems with alcohol and other drugs, their symptoms may get worse when they are no longer self medicating. So it's important to make sure that the coach you're hiring has some skills, or that your client's going to have a therapist or a psychiatrist on board as well. That's the case with a number of my clients, that they have a therapist and a psychiatrist as well as me. And then there are a number of what I believe to be, areas of addiction that require some expertise. And this is a short list. So I believe that if you're going to be working with someone who is trying to recover from sex addiction, that you should know something about it, and you should have some coach training that has taught you how to coach that particular topic. Same thing with food addiction, especially anorexia, which is um, exceedingly dangerous, and has a high mortality. Many people die from it, and it's not something that you can say that you can coach and help them with, unless you really, really do have expertise in it. So, and I believe really, you would want some specialized training if you're going to be working with codependency, or um, gambling, any of those things that are, don't fit the chemical dependency. And even within chemical dependency, if you know nothing about, meth addiction, it presents that person as a very different uh, mental capacity than somebody who was using other drugs. So again, you're gonna want to find a coach who has some of that kind of background. The and actually I think I covered this in the last slide, but you're also going to be looking for other sorts of matches. But this is really about expertise in the particular problem that your client has. And so, the training that I do has, it covers those things. It does. I don't think that anybody leaves my training thinking they're an expert in it. But what I do see is that is that they develop an interest in a particular thing, and then they go on. They've been exposed to sort of, what are the best books, what are the best standards, where else would you get further training if you want to become if you want to become somebody whose niche is coaching gay men with sex addiction. Where can you get further training? So there is a risk of hiring someone who is unethical. And I would say that's because there's really no standards. I don't think that um, there is a lot of screening. If somebody has gotten their certification online, then who is actually can vouch that they are a stable and compassionate and moral person. So, I heard someone say once that recovery coaching was a psychopath's dream, because we're working with people who are very vulnerable, and there's really no standards right now. So I just want you to know that you really do need to scrutinize who you refer to your client, and you need to know any number of things about them, which I cover again here in a little bit. And it doesn't mean that the people who have gotten an online training are necessarily unethical. It just is saying, wow, nobody has actually checked them out. So you would want to investigate. I'm going to also say this because the International Coach Federation is a highly regarded um, credentialing and credentialing body for individual coaches and accrediting of schools. One of the things that they found was people would join the ICF, and which allowed them to put their logo on their website, and so people would just assume that they had been to coaching school because they had this ICF logo on their site. Um, that so again, don't make assumptions that, because what do they say, the bad guy doesn't always wear a black hat, might wear a white hat. Um, and so you need to look into it. So the last real risk here is hiring the wrong type of coach. And the basic distinction you're going to want to make is, does my client need a peer coach or a professional coach? And I'd like to spend just a little bit of time talking about that one. Peer coaches um, are really the appropriate choice if your client needs basic services and needs someone to help them get them. If there's somebody who is unlikely to be able to negotiate on their own behalf to to find the support that they need in their community. So peers are really experts in local communities. Professional coaches, my clients and my students' clients and my grads' clients, we all have clients all over the country because most of us are doing phone-based coaching. Some of my students only do face-to-face coaching, so that's not always a distinction. But um, I can't sit down with somebody and help them fill out the application for housing. I might, if they needed, we would have to. I mean, it's a little awkward to do that over the phone, though we could go through it line by line. But really, for that kind of thing, a peer is a better choice. A peer coach is a better choice. Um, and and I don't know whether these distinctions will be there in 10 years. I don't know if these two things are going to blend. They sprang up independently, but the peers are already getting better coaching skills. And I think that some of the professional coaches are looking at what peers do and going, yeah, that is really good. And maybe I should know something about my local community. I don't know. But anyway, professional coaches are the right coach if your client is somebody who really wants to look at their whole life, who really wants to make sure that the quality of life that they have in recovery is is makes it worthwhile for them to stay in recovery, because a professional coach is going to take kind of a broader view than the peer coach is. You're going to find more peer coaches who have a personal experience with things like having been incarcerated. I did one of my students was incarcerated once, and but again, for him, he and he does coach people. He coaches white collar crime, people in recovery who committed white collar crimes, um, and again, so it's slightly different. Oops. Um, Sorry about that. I don't. Okay. Anyway, so again, if your client is going to want somebody who's face to face, and can help them, really reduce the barriers to getting into recovery, and then you're going to be looking at peers. Um, if this is a person who maybe has, whether you could say they didn't go down as far, or whether they are simply somebody who's more confident, or possibly better educated, possibly has more financial resources. Um, I don't. Then you'll want to consider a professional recovery coach. That's going to be one of the considerations you'll want to take a look at. What's going to fit for my client, and you can have your client, offer them some choices and let them interview a couple of coaches, maybe of different types, and see what they choose as a good fit. um, Again, if your client has a variety of issues, make sure that their coach is really going to be able to help them with some of that. I think that, for instance, I don't my students don't end up, they don't really learn. I mean, they're not learning how to be therapists, but they are learning, skills that can help somebody deal with the chatter in their head. Can help them understand how to detach from that. um, they can they do some kind of self therapy. I'm referring to a specific book on internal family systems. They're trained in that. They're trained in voice dialogue coaching, so they do have some skills that allow them to help that person, just sort of manage not just the external challenges in terms of what triggers them and all that, but some of the internal challenges that can be loud for people, especially in early recovery, or if some of us, it can go on and on. Who knows? Okay. Um, for many people, they're going to want a match in terms of gender. So, especially if it's a face to face coaching, and I'm not 100%, but let's just say thus far, I believe all the peer coaches that I have known only work with their own gender. Um, Phone-based coaches work with either gender, and but again, your client may be more comfortable working with a man, or they may be more comfortable working with a woman. They may want to work with somebody who is also gay, or they may want to work with somebody who, um, anyway, doesn't. I don't know, but anyway, there are many things regarding gender and sexual preferences that might come into play when somebody chooses a coach. I think it's also worthwhile to see if you can find someone that might be a good match for the personality for of your client or for yourself. Um, I train a lot of different students, and they have really different coaching styles. Even though they end up being good coaches, some of them are more challenging. Some of them can be, more soft spoken. Some of them, and again, that's just really going to be what what your client likes or what you like. Do you resonate with this person? Do you like them? Do you feel like this is somebody who might be of service to you? um it's personal preference. I think cultural competency is important. So I've worked with really just a wide variety of people, and uh, I don't I don't take cultural competency to merely mean. I mean, I think it should be a given that your coach is very respectful and a compassionate person, and respect and compassion go a long ways. But it's worthwhile to really go ahead and educate yourself about Asian culture, about Native American culture, about African American culture. If you're going to be, if you want to work with someone who, if someone wants to hire you and they have that background, it's your responsibility to make sure that you actually are aware of some of the things that are going to play into their decision making and their social relations. So anyway, um, so cultural competency is really important. And I think I'm going to add one more thing to look for in a coach, which I didn't add here, but I'm going to just add it in right now. Another thing you want in your coach is common sense. And I wish common sense were common, but it isn't always necessarily so. And not every not every recovery coach actually um, is familiar with the 12 steps. Some of them may have come in through a different program. Um, not every coach, um, I've had maybe only two or three students that I really felt lacked common sense, and I really couldn't instill it in them. So, but that's another thing to look for. Do they make, is there any red flags? Do you see, how they think and that kind of thing? Can they follow a train of thought? Can they know when to refer? That's an important thing also. Okay. So, to find a suitable recovery coach, you want to know what you're looking for. Um, you may be looking for a sober escort. You may be looking for a peer recovery support specialist. You really don't care whether they have coaching skills. You just simply want to make sure that your client is connected to local services. Um, but, if because addiction is an equal opportunity disease, then it covers the whole gamut of experience. There are many very high functioning people who are alcoholics, who are cocaine addicts, who are sex addicts, um, and they're going to want a sophisticated person to coach them. So you're going to want to really be clear about what you or your client is looking for. You're going to want to know what the standards are for the type of coach that you want. And again, these are still unfolding, but some states have Florida has a recovery coach specialist certification board, something like that. And so if you're in Florida, you might, and you want somebody who's trained as a recovery coach or as a peer recovery support specialist, you would probably want someone who meets those standards. Um, the standards, the standards for life coaching in general, just general life coaching, is going to be in this country is typically going to be established by the International Coach Federation, and you can find out what they are. As I say, Recovery Coaches International will be publishing those for professional recovery coaches here in next few months. And and again, you also want to know, in essence, what your standards are. What would be a deal breaker for you? What would be a red flag for you? And that's part of investigating before you invest. And professional recovery coaching costs in the same range as hiring a therapist. You can hire one for $20 an hour. You can hire one for $200 an hour. Um, but you really want to make sure that you're getting the quality that you need and want. And so, um, and the only way you're going to find that out is to ask them where they got trained, to check that out, to see whether the place exists. What sort of place is it? Um, did they graduate? And and to see what kind. Do they have referrals? Um, you can ask questions like, do you know? You can ask them questions. I mean, many people who um, have addictions, have some type of criminal background. It doesn't necessarily mean they are all bad. Marijuana arrests are one of the most common criminal charges. On the other hand, you may be concerned if they had violent crimes or sex crimes or things like that. So again, go ahead and ask the tough questions. Ask for referrals, ask to talk to other people who've worked with them. And I think the other thing to know is that there are things that recovery coaches don't do, or shouldn't do. They shouldn't get involved in your personal finances in the sense of you know taking care of your bills for you or that kind of thing. Um, just be careful. I say that because I've heard of um, some things that were really disturbing that done by people who called themselves recovery coaches. Um, so I really want each of you to investigate before you hire someone. I'll just tell you a couple of things to finish up in terms of peer recovery coaching and peer recovery support. There are many states that have good trainings in them. There's CCAR in Connecticut. There's standards in Georgia, Texas, Arizona. So you may want to be looking, if you're going to hire somebody. You may want to be seeing where they went to school, and is it a place that you can find online that you can check out and that kind of thing. For professional recovery coaching, um, Crossroads My School is good, and there's a school that is I think it's pre-approved by the International Coach Federation. They basically train everybody for 60 hours, and then they have all these 30-hour specialties, and they have a 30-hour specialty in recovery coaching. I can't vouch that. I've never met any of their grads, so I don't know much about them. But and I personally prefer that, a recovery coach not just have life coach training and some personal experience, but at least there are certainly any number of people like that. And some I've met and I think they're pretty good. And there are a couple that I think um, would be better if they actually were trained to apply those skills better in addiction recovery. So, okay, I'm going to see if there are any questions. I'm going to stick around and see if there's any questions um, about hiring a recovery coach or recovery coach training. And so I know there are some people who have who could talk if I unmuted them. So is there anybody who would like to ask a question? And I think I'm going to try unmuting a few of you and see if that's true. And if this gets too noisy, then whoops. Okay, that's what happens sometimes. Okay. Um, so some of you, if you wanted to ask a question, could now, and then some of you would have to type if you want to send me a message. So, are there any questions? So I've got one question here asking about the training that I do. Yes, there's still room for a couple more. There's not a lot of room left in the one coming up on September 25th, but I think there's room for two more people at this time. Um, and it's, is there anything else you'd like to know? So they want to know what happens when they graduate. So basically, when you graduate, you are, um, you're given a diploma that says you have. It takes a year to finish my training, so it's a long process. But you have a certificate, a diploma that says you have you basically you're going to get 60 hours that can be applied to the International Coach Federation standards so that you can become accredited by the ICF at the ACC level, and also have another, let's see, 27 hours of continuing education if you want to go that route. By the time you graduate, Recovery Coaches International will have their training done, and I don't know, but I know I do know. Um, you will be able to meet the standards that they intend to establish. They haven't made those decisions entirely yet, so um, I'll just leave it at that. The other thing that the ICF is, I mean, that RCI is considering, and I don't know whether they'll do it or not, but they're considering also offering an entry level. I think they're going to call it an associate credential for people who are coming in who are already trained as therapists or as chemical dependency counselors or peer recovery support. So they would only need 40 hours this specifically in recovery coach training in order to get the lowest level of training there. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to tell you. Again, you can look on the peer side. Um, you can look for what the national certifications are going to be. I think they'll be published here shortly if they're not already, and you could find those on ICRC, I believe. So that's pretty much it. So thank you all for coming. If you have any questions, let me see what I want to give you this one back. My email address is coachalida@gmail.com. And I'm really happy to talk to any of you about recovery coaching. If you might be coming from a treatment center and be interested in having your staff trained, or you might want to learn how from alumni services, how to get some of your alumni trained as recovery coaches. Um, or you might be interested in hiring a quality coach. And some of my students are very good, and some of them have expertise in things that I don't do. So, anyway, thank you all for coming, and this will be put on my website. That's www.crossroadscoaching.net. It'll be on the right hand side under media. Okay. Last word is I have two more webinars I'll be doing in the next few weeks. I promise to come on time for those, and they'll definitely start at 10 a.m. and I'll get the dates out. But one of them is going to be looking at a bit of the history of relapse prevention and really some other ways to look at staying in recovery. And I'm also going to do another one on kind of it'll be on the topic of health, wealth, and happiness in and long and some of the challenges of long-term recovery. So that's it from me. Thanks all, and I wish you all the very best and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.